She gripped his notebook and ripped the pages right in front of his face, the white of her blouse practically glowing in the sunlight as her navy blue trousers glided across the classroom tiles. Eyes cold, smile fake, words sharp as a razor, and the entire class fell silent the moment she said it. Boys like you never go far, especially when you think being loud is the same as being smart. But what she didn't realize, what would change everything, was that someone new had entered the room just seconds before, someone who wasn't just a guest, but a ghost from her past and a protector of this present, someone who'd been quietly sitting in the back corner, watching her every move like a hawk and about to expose the truth behind her perfectly ironed shirt and her polished fake smile. And when he finally stood, the teacher's knees buckled, her voice cracked, and the entire class turned around to see who was about to speak. The moment that would ignite a firestorm nobody could put out and reveal secrets buried beneath a decade of polished lies. So buckle in. Stay with this story till the end, because what starts with humiliation turns into a battle of justice, truth, and the kind of courage that leaves entire cities shaken to their core. Now let's take it back to where it all began. To a school hallway where 13-year-old Malik stepped into his new school wearing a clean red polo shirt, faded jeans, and dreams bigger than the sky. A quiet boy with a mind built for brilliance, but surrounded by whispers he couldn't quite place yet as he walked past lockers painted beige, bulletin boards filled with photos he wasn't in, and students who barely glanced his way until he stepped into room 208 where Mrs. Caldwell, with her white blouse starched to perfection and navy blue trousers that fit like they belonged on a magazine cover, greeted him with a look that said everything her mouth didn't. Her smile thin and her eyes quick to judge as she pointed to the desk at the back. Away from the windows, away from the group projects, away from the front of the class, and as Malik slid into his seat he noticed how she paused, just a second too long, before turning her back to him as if his presence had already ruined the energy she'd curated in her perfectly controlled classroom. The days that followed would paint a picture no child should have to live through, where subtle jabs became cruel games, where Malik's raised hand stayed ignored until it lowered in shame, where his correct answers were marked wrong with no explanation, and his essays returned with red ink bleeding across the pages. But the others, especially the pale kids with neat hair and soft voices, got praise for half the effort and double the mistakes, and soon Malik stopped trying to ask questions, stopped offering answers, and started shrinking inside himself like he was trying to make himself invisible. But what broke him wasn't the silence, it was the mockery. "Do you even understand English?" she said one day, laughing lightly as if it were a joke, but the sting in her voice was as real as the tightening in Malik's chest. And when the class chuckled, not because it was funny but because they were scared to do otherwise, Malik clenched his jaw so tight he thought his teeth might crack. And still he said nothing because his mother had told him to be respectful, to be patient, to never be the angry black boy they all expected him to be. But patience has its limits. And one Friday afternoon, when she called him to the front to read out loud like the rest of the class, she watched him stumble over a word and pounced. "Didn't you go to school before this? Or were you just raised on the streets?" she said, her voice all sugar but her eyes full of venom. And when the laughter rang out, something in Malik's chest snapped, not into rage, but into resolve. He didn't know who had seen it all from the hallway. The man in the black hoodie and gold-rimmed glasses who had come to visit the school on behalf of the district. But by Monday, the tides had already begun to turn, because that man was not just a district staff member. He was a civil rights attorney sent to evaluate complaints, a quiet observer, with a mission and a folder full of past incidents tied to Mrs. Caldwell's name. What happened next would unfold in waves of investigation, of testimonies from students too scared to speak until now, of parents who came forward with stories of unexplained detentions, poor grades despite hard work, and one black student's mother who had kept every assignment, every graded test, and brought them forward like evidence in a courtroom. And suddenly Mrs. Caldwell's white blouse began to look less like elegance and more like a costume hiding rot underneath, her past students' words like ghosts rising from forgotten transcripts, and the school board who once praised her for discipline and structure now stared at the compiled reports with widened eyes, because she wasn't just biased. She was brutal, calculated, and unapologetic, and Malik's case wasn't an isolated incident. It was the latest in a long string of suppressed complaints that had been buried under bureaucracy and denial until now. And as news stations caught wind, as teachers started whispering in the staff room, as students rallied in silent protest wearing red shirts like Malik's to class, the pressure became too heavy to ignore. The board suspended Mrs. Caldwell pending investigation, but that was only the beginning, because Malik, encouraged by the attorney, his mom, and a new support system, spoke at the local town hall, not with anger but with grace and detail, recounting every insult, every dismissal, every moment he was made to feel smaller because of his skin. And as his story spread online, thousands poured in with similar tales from their childhoods, some even former students of Mrs. Caldwell themselves, and within weeks, a formal lawsuit was filed not just against the teacher, but against the system that protected her. And as the courtroom filled, Malik sat beside his mother, both wearing red, while Mrs. Caldwell arrived in a dull gray suit, her perfect image cracking under pressure. And when the judge ruled in favor of Malik, awarding damages and mandating the district overhaul their discrimination reporting systems, it wasn't about the money, it was about the truth being seen, about restoring dignity, about standing up when your voice has been buried for too long. Mrs. Caldwell was stripped of her license, barred from teaching again, and as Malik returned to school the following year, he didn't sit in the back. He sat in the front row, now a symbol of strength for every kid who'd ever been silenced, with students and teachers alike knowing his name not out of pity, but out of respect. And you, watching this now, remember that the most dangerous thing about racism in schools isn't the loud moments. It's the quiet ones, the ones dressed in white blouses and fake smiles. So stay alert, speak up, and never be afraid to wear red in a room designed to dim your light, because your story, like Malik's, might be the spark that changes everything. Watch till the end. Subscribe, like, and share this with anyone who needs to know that courage can begin in the back of a classroom and still make it all the way to the front of history.